Welcome to Lotus Light Teachings, a place where ancient wisdom meets modern life. If you've ever felt that anger or frustration has too much control over your peace, you're not alone. But what if there was a way to move through life, unshaken by the words or actions of others? Today, we're diving deep into the Buddhist approach to mastering our emotions and finding unshakable peace. Stay with me because what you're about to learn might just change the way you see the world. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones of resentment, anger, and frustration. Every harsh word, every unfair moment, every betrayal. You pick them up and add them to your load. Day after day, the weight increases, and yet you never stop to ask, why am I carrying this? Have you ever felt that a single comment ruined your entire day? Or that someone's actions kept replaying in your mind, making you angrier each time? You're not alone. We all struggle with anger. The Buddha once said, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." Let that sink in. Anger itself is not the punishment. It's the effect anger has on us that is. It steals our peace, clouds our judgment. It makes us react in ways we regret. But what if I told you that anger is not something others impose on you? It's something you allow? Today, we'll explore how to break free from anger using profound yet practical Buddhist teachings. Stick around because what you're about to learn will not only help you manage anger, it will transform your entire outlook on life. Let's begin. 1. Your reaction is your choice. There was a time in my life when I let other people control my emotions. I didn't realize it at the time, of course. I thought I was simply responding to the world around me. If someone was rude, I had every right to be upset. If someone betrayed me, of course I had to feel angry. That's what normal people do, right? But then I stumbled upon an old Buddhist story, one that completely shifted the way I saw anger. A man once approached the Buddha, full of rage, and hurled insults at him. He called him a fraud, a liar, a fool. But the Buddha remained completely calm, unfazed by the man's outburst. After a moment, he asked the man a question. If someone offers you a gift, but you refuse to accept it, to whom does it belong? The man, still fuming, replied, to the one who offered it. The Buddha smiled. Then why should I accept your anger? I remember reading that story and feeling something shift inside me. It was such a simple idea, so obvious even. And yet, I had never really thought about it that way. No one can force you to be angry. No one can make you react. Your emotions are yours to control. It reminded me of a time when I was in college, working a part-time job at a busy cafe. One day, a customer came in, furious about something that had nothing to do with me. Maybe his coffee order was wrong. Maybe he was having a terrible morning. Who knows? But he looked at me like I was personally responsible for ruining his day. He started yelling, his voice sharp and accusing. I felt my face heat up, my fists clenching at my sides. I wanted to snap back, to defend myself, to match his energy with my own. But then, almost by instinct, I took a deep breath. I thought of that story. His anger is not mine to accept. So instead of reacting, I stayed calm. I looked at him with understanding and simply said, I'm sorry you're having a tough day. How can I help? And just like that, something changed. The tension in the air seemed to dissolve. The man's face softened, and he sighed, shaking his head. I'm sorry, he muttered. I didn't mean to take it out on you. That moment taught me something powerful. Anger is contagious, but so is peace. When we react with rage, we only fuel the fire. But when we choose calm, we become a mirror that reflects something different, something softer, something better. But let's be honest, choosing peace isn't always easy. Sometimes anger feels justified. Sometimes it feels like a necessary shield, a way to protect ourselves from being walked all over. I used to think that letting go of anger meant being weak, that if I didn't fight back, I was allowing people to take advantage of me. But I was wrong. Letting go of anger isn't about weakness. It's about power. It's about deciding that your peace is more valuable than proving a point. Take a moment and think about the last time you were angry. Maybe someone cut you off in traffic. Maybe a coworker made a passive-aggressive comment. Maybe someone you love hurt you in a way that still lingers in the back of your mind. Now ask yourself, did my anger change the situation? Did it make me feel better? Most of the time, the answer is no. That's because anger rarely serves us. It burns hot but leaves nothing behind except exhaustion. And yet, we hold on to it like it's protecting us, when in reality, it's only hurting us. Nelson Mandela once said, "Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies." The same is true for anger. It corrodes us from the inside, while the person we're angry at walks away, completely unaffected. So how do we break free? It starts with a pause. A single moment between what happens to us and how we respond. That pause is where our power lies. The next time someone tries to provoke you, instead of reacting immediately, take a breath. Ask yourself, is this worth my peace? Is this worth my energy? More often than not, you'll realize it's not. I won't pretend this is easy. It takes practice. Some days you'll fail. Some days you'll still snap. But that's okay. The goal isn't perfection. It's awareness. Every time you choose peace over anger, you're rewiring your brain, strengthening a new habit. And little by little, you become the kind of person who doesn't get easily shaken. I think about that cafe moment often. It was such a small interaction, barely a blip in the grand scheme of my life. And yet, it was a turning point. It made me realize that the world will always be chaotic. People will always have bad days. Things will always go wrong. But I get to decide how I show up. And so do you. So the next time someone tries to hand you their anger, remember, you don't have to take it. Let it pass. Choose peace. And watch how your world begins to change. Now, I leave you with this. What would happen if, just for one day, you refused to let anyone steal your peace? Try it. See what shifts. And if you do, let me know, because I think you'll be surprised at how powerful it feels. 2. The power of the pause. There was a time when I thought quick reactions meant strength. That answering immediately, defending myself instantly, and proving my point without hesitation made me someone who couldn't be walked over. If someone insulted me, I fired back. If life threw me a curveball, I pushed against it. But the more I lived this way, the more exhausted I felt. It was as if I was fighting a battle that never ended, a war that was being waged against no one but myself. Then I heard a simple phrase that changed everything. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies your power and freedom. At first, I didn't fully understand it. It sounded wise, sure, but what did it actually mean in real life? It wasn't until I watched a close friend of mine handle a situation with an almost supernatural level of calm that I truly grasped its power. We were at a coffee shop one afternoon when a man, clearly having a bad day, bumped into my friend, spilling coffee all over his shirt. The man barely muttered an apology and walked away, completely indifferent. I was furious for my friend. I expected him to react, to say something, do something. Instead, he simply looked down at his stained shirt, let out a small chuckle and said, "Well, I guess this shirt had lived its best life anyway." Then he calmly stood up, walked to the restroom and cleaned himself off. No anger, no frustration, just acceptance and grace. I was stunned. "That didn't bother you?" I asked him later. He shrugged. "I could have gotten mad. I could have made a scene. But for what? It wouldn't have changed anything. Just a waste of energy." That moment planted a seed in my mind. It made me realize that most of the stress, anger, and frustration we experience isn't caused by what happens to us, but by how we react to it. It's the space between action and reaction that determines whether we live a life of peace or a life of endless conflict. I started noticing this pattern everywhere. In a heated argument, the person who pauses before responding always has more control over the conversation. In a crisis, the one who doesn't panic but takes a deep breath first is the one who finds the best solution. The leaders we admire, whether it's Barack Obama's steady composure under pressure or Steve Jobs' deliberate choice of words in interviews, all mastered the art of the pause. But here's the thing, pausing doesn't come naturally. We are wired to react. When something threatens our peace, our brains jump into fight or flight mode. It takes conscious effort to pause. But when you do, When you give yourself that brief moment of silence, you reclaim control over your life. I remember the first time I actively applied this lesson. I was on a call with a difficult client who was condescending, rude, and dismissive. He picked apart my work, criticized things that weren't even mistakes, and made it clear that he saw me as incompetent. The old me would have fired back immediately, defending myself, proving my worth. But instead, I remembered my friend at the coffee shop. I took a deep breath. I let the silence stretch for just a few seconds. Then, instead of reacting emotionally, I calmly said, "I hear you. Let me take a moment to process this and get back to you with a solution." The energy shifted instantly. The moment I didn't engage in his aggression, it lost its power. The client softened. By the end of the conversation, he was actually thanking me for my patience. That's when I realized, silence is not weakness. It is power. When you pause, you give yourself a moment of choice. You get to decide whether to meet anger or with understanding. Whether to let frustration control you or to let it pass. Whether to let a stranger's bad mood ruin your day or to move on with peace. Sounds simple, but it changes everything. The next time you feel anger rising, pause. Just 5 seconds. That's all it takes. Breathe deeply. Observe your feelings instead of being controlled by them. Choose a response that aligns with your peace, not your ego. Some of the most powerful decisions in history were made in a moment of pause. Martin Luther King Jr., standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial before delivering "I Have a Dream." Nelson Mandela walking free after 27 years in prison, choosing peace over revenge. These weren't just moments of action. They were moments of deliberate pause before action. And it's something we can all apply, no matter how small or big the situation. Imagine how different our lives would be if we all took a moment before reacting. What if, instead of arguing back, we paused? What if, instead of sending that angry text, we took a breath? What if, instead of jumping to conclusions, we observed first? How much unnecessary pain could we avoid? I won't say it's easy. There will be moments when you forget. Moments when emotions take over. But if you can practice this, even just once a day, you'll start to see the difference. People will notice the shift in you. They'll wonder why you're not so easily shaken. Why you don't get caught up in petty conflicts. Why you always seem to have clarity in chaotic situations. It's not magic. It's just the power of the pause. And once you master it, you'll wonder how you ever lived without it. So, tell me, when was the last time you reacted impulsively? And how would things have changed if you had just paused? 3. Separate feelings from reactions. I remember the first time I truly lost my temper. Not the kind of fleeting irritation that comes and goes, but a deep, uncontrollable anger that shook me to my core. I was 17, standing in my parents' living room, my face burning with frustration. My father had just told me I wasn't allowed to go on a road trip with my friends, a trip we had been planning for months. I felt betrayed, misunderstood. I wanted to fight back, to shout, to make him see how unfair he was being. Instead, I stormed out of the room and slammed the door behind me. For hours, I let the anger boil inside me, replaying the conversation over and over. It wasn't until later that night, when I sat alone in my room, staring at the ceiling, that I started to see things differently. Was I really angry at my father, or was I angry at the feeling of being powerless? That realization changed something in me. Anger is like a storm inside a glass of water. If you shake it, the water churns violently. But if you set the glass down, it slowly becomes clear again. The mistake most people make is that they keep shaking the glass. They fuel their anger, replaying situations, feeding their emotions instead of letting them settle. But here's the thing, you are not your anger. You are the observer of it. It took me years to fully understand that. For the longest time, I believed that my emotions defined me. If I felt sad, I was a sad person. If I felt angry, I was an angry person. But emotions are just temporary visitors, like passing clouds in the sky. The sky itself, the real you, remains untouched. I once read about a monk who had spent decades meditating in solitude. One day, a man came to visit him and began hurling insults, trying to provoke a reaction. The monk simply smiled and said, "Ah, I see anger has come to visit me." He didn't say, "I am angry." He said, "Anger is visiting me." That small shift in language is powerful, because the moment you separate yourself from the emotion, you take away its control over you. It no longer owns you, it simply passes through. I started practicing this in my own life. Every time frustration or sadness surfaced, I would pause and think, "This is just a visitor. It will leave soon." And you know what? It always did. We spend so much of our lives reacting instead of observing. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and we explode with rage. Someone criticizes us, and we immediately feel defensive. We let emotions dictate our actions instead of taking a step back and seeing them for what they really are. Temporary states, not permanent truths. Next time you feel anger rising, try this. Instead of saying, "I am angry," say, "Anger is here," then watch what happens. Chances are it will pass much faster than you expect. 4. Let go of expectations. One of the greatest sources of frustration in life isn't what actually happens to us. It's what we expect to happen. We expect people to treat us fairly. We expect plans to go smoothly. We expect love to be returned in the same way we give it. But life doesn't work that way. I learned this the hard way a few years ago when a close friend betrayed me. We had been inseparable for years, the kind of friendship where you know each other's secrets, dreams, and fears. But one day, without warning, she cut me off. No explanation, no closure, just silence. I spent months obsessing over it. Why would she do this? Didn't I deserve at least an answer? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. But one night, I came across a simple quote that stopped me in my tracks. The river does not argue with the rocks in its path. It simply flows around them. I sat with that for a long time. What if I was like the river? What if, instead of fighting against what had already happened, I simply let it be? Because the truth is, suffering doesn't come from reality. It comes from our expectations of how things should be. I expected my friend to explain herself. I expected fairness. But the moment I let go of that expectation, something incredible happened. The pain started to dissolve. We hold on to expectations like they are guarantees, but they aren't. People don't always act the way we want them to. Plans fall apart. Life takes unexpected turns. And when we resist this, we suffer. But when we let go, when we flow like the river, we find peace. I think about this often when I see people stuck in frustration. The employee who expects a promotion and doesn't get it. The person in love who expects their feelings to be reciprocated but gets rejected. The friend who expects loyalty but is met with betrayal. The suffering isn't in the event itself. It's in the gap between reality and expectation. So what can we do? Whenever frustration arises, ask yourself, what expectation am I clinging to? And then release it. Let life unfold as it is instead of how you demand it to be. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you don't try. It simply means you stop wasting energy resisting what already is. Some of the most peaceful people I know aren't the ones whose lives are perfect. They are the ones who have mastered the art of letting go. Think about the last time you were truly frustrated. Was it because of what happened? Or because of what you expected to happen? What would your life look like if, just for a day, you chose to flow like the river instead of arguing with the rocks? 5. Choosing peace over being right. I used to think winning an argument meant winning in life. That proving a point, making someone else admit they were wrong, or having the last word was a sign of strength. But I was wrong. There's a moment that stands out in my memory. One that changed how I see conflict forever. A few years ago, I found myself in the middle of a heated argument with someone I loved. It was one of those fights where no one is really listening, where words are being hurled like weapons, and neither side is willing to lower their shield. I don't even remember what we were fighting about, but I remember how I felt. Tense, angry, determined to win. Then something unexpected happened. In the middle of our argument, she suddenly stopped. She took a deep breath and said, "You know what? I see your point." And just like that, the fight was over. I stood there, confused. What just happened? I was ready for another round, ready to keep proving my side. But when she chose peace over being right, I had nothing left to fight against. That moment stuck with me because it taught me something powerful. Arguments are fueled by resistance, and when one side stops resisting, the fire burns out. I later came across an old Zen story that perfectly captured this idea. A samurai once challenged a monk to a debate. The samurai was powerful, skilled in battle, and known for his sharp mind. But the monk simply smiled and remained silent. Frustrated, the samurai demanded, "Defend yourself. Prove your wisdom." The monk finally replied, "If someone offers you a poison gift and you refuse to accept it, to whom does it belong?" The samurai frowned, realizing the answer. Likewise, when someone offers you conflict, you do not have to take it. It took me years to fully grasp the depth of that lesson. Real power is not in proving your point. It's in mastering your inner peace. Think about the last time you had an argument. Maybe it was with a partner, a friend, a coworker. Maybe it was online, in a comment section where opinions clashed like swords. Now ask yourself, did winning that argument actually bring you peace? More often than not, arguments don't end because one side proves they were right. They end when one person chooses to walk away from the need to be right. That doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. It simply means recognizing that your peace is worth more than your ego. The next time someone tries to provoke you, instead of arguing, try this. Take a breath, look at them calmly, and say, "I see your point." You don't have to agree. You are simply choosing peace over conflict. I promise you, it will feel like a superpower. 6. Detach from others' opinions. For most of my life, I cared way too much about what people thought of me. Every compliment lifted me up. Every criticism crushed me. I was like a boat without an anchor, tossed around by the waves of other people's opinions. Then one day, I heard a story that changed everything. Buddha once held up a rock and asked his students, "If I call this a diamond, does it change?" The students shook their heads. Buddha continued, "If I call it worthless, does it lose its weight?" Again, they shook their heads. Then why should your worth change because of someone else's words? That hit me like a lightning bolt. I had been treating my worth like it was something borrowed, something other people could give or take away. But the truth is, my value was never up for debate, and neither is yours. Think about it. If someone calls a diamond worthless, does it stop being a diamond? No, it remains exactly what it is, regardless of whether people recognize its value or not. But here's the thing. Most people don't see you as you are. They see you as they are. A bitter person may call you selfish. An insecure person may call you arrogant. A jealous person may call you undeserving. And a wise person, they will say nothing at all because they know your worth is not theirs to decide. That realization set me free. I stopped chasing approval. I stopped living for validation. I stopped twisting myself into shapes just to fit someone else's idea of who I should be. Does that mean criticism doesn't hurt? Of course not. We're human. Words can sting. But when you remember they do not define you, you stop giving them so much power. I think about celebrities like Keanu Reeves, universally loved, yet never consumed by fame. He doesn't chase applause, nor does he fight back against critics. He simply exists as he is, unshaken by public opinion. Or look at Eleanor Roosevelt, who once said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." Imagine what your life would look like if you lived by that truth. The next time someone criticizes you, pause and ask yourself, is this a reflection of me or of them? If it's constructive, use it to grow. If it's just meant to hurt, let it go. Not everyone's opinion deserves space in your mind. Not every insult is worth your energy. You are not here to be liked by everyone. You are here to be fully yourself. And the moment you embrace that, you become untouchable. So here's my question to you. What would you do differently if you no longer feared judgment? 7. Setting boundaries to protect your energy. I used to think saying yes was a virtue. That being available, accommodating, and open to everyone made me a good person. I stretched myself thin, answering calls at all hours, saying yes to plans I didn't want, listening to complaints that drained me, and absorbing the emotions of people who didn't respect mine. Until one day I broke. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no slammed doors. It was quiet. I woke up feeling exhausted. Even though I had gotten a full night's sleep, I stared at my phone, dreading the unread messages. My heart sank at the thought of another day filled with obligations I didn't want. That was the moment I realized I had given so much of myself away that I had nothing left for me. That was the moment I learned about boundaries. Imagine your inner peace as a castle. The moat around it is your boundaries. Some people bring light when they enter, while others bring chaos. And if you don't guard your gates, you will drown in their energy. For years, I struggled with guilt when I set boundaries. I worried about hurting people's feelings, about seeming selfish. But then I learned a simple truth. People who get upset when you set boundaries are the ones who benefited from you having none. Let that sink in. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to you. Some people only show up when they need something. Some drain your energy with constant negativity. Some only respect you when you enforce limits. I started small. The first time I said, "I'll have to get back to you on that." Instead of immediately saying yes, I felt a pang of guilt. The first time I let a call go to voicemail without apologizing for not answering, I felt selfish. But then I noticed something. The more I protected my energy, the better I felt. And the best part? The people who truly cared about me didn't mind. They respected my space. It was only those who took advantage of my endless availability who complained. So I stopped feeling guilty. Now, when someone drains my energy, instead of reacting, I simply say, "I will revisit this when I am centered." This small phrase is magic. It teaches people that your peace is not up for negotiation. It is yours to protect. And if someone truly values you, they will respect that. So, ask yourself, who in your life energizes you? And who drains you? And what would happen if, just for 1 week, you chose to prioritize your peace over pleasing others? 8. The art of silence. Not every battle is worth fighting. I learned this the hard way. I used to think every insult needed a rebuttal. Every misunderstanding had to be corrected. Every slight against me deserved a response. Then one day, I came across a simple Buddhist teaching. If someone offers you an insult and you do not accept it, to whom does it belong? I sat with that for a while. I thought about every time someone had tried to provoke me. The coworker who threw passive-aggressive comments my way. The stranger online who twisted my words. The friend who lashed out at me because of their own pain. What if I had simply not engaged? What if I had let their words fall to the ground instead of catching them and throwing them back? I decided to try something radical: silence. For 24 hours, I practiced. No complaining. No defending myself. No reacting to negativity. And you know what happened? I felt free. The world didn't end because I didn't correct someone's opinion of me. The tension disappeared faster when I didn't feed it. The power dynamics shifted when I stopped engaging in battles that didn't serve me. I realized something important. Silence is not weakness. It is strategy. Silence makes people sit with their own words. It forces them to face their own energy instead of projecting it onto you. I think of great leaders, people like Barack Obama or Michelle Obama, who rarely engage in petty arguments. Instead of reacting emotionally, they choose their words carefully. And sometimes they choose no words at all. That is power. Silence does not mean you don't care. It means you value your peace more than your pride. The next time someone tries to provoke you, pause. Let the moment breathe. Watch how the energy shifts when you don't play the game. And ask yourself, how much of my energy have I wasted reacting to things that did not deserve a response? 9. Reframe every situation. There was a time in my life when I believed that things were either good or bad. That life was either working in my favor or against me. If something unfair happened, I labeled it a setback. If someone treated me poorly, I saw it as an attack. I thought life was happening to me, and that mindset turned every challenge into a personal burden. Then I met someone who completely changed the way I saw the world. I was on a long flight, exhausted and irritated, when I struck up a conversation with the man sitting next to me. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, with the kind of presence that instantly made you feel at ease. At some point, I found myself venting about a frustrating situation. Someone had let me down, and I was stuck in the loop of why did this happen to me? He listened patiently, then smiled and said, "What if this isn't a punishment, but a redirection?" I stared at him, confused. He continued, "Life is always teaching us something. The question is, are we paying attention?" That single sentence stuck with me. I thought about all the times I had assumed the worst about a situation. The job I didn't get that eventually led me to a better opportunity. The breakup that felt like the end of the world but freed me for something greater. The rejection that forced me to level up. What if nothing had ever gone wrong? What if it had all just been life redirecting me to where I needed to be? Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. A traveler once entered a village and was met with hostility. The people sneered at him, whispered behind his back. He could have reacted with anger, assumed they were cruel. But instead, he asked himself, what if this is not an attack, but a lesson? He later learned that the villagers were not mean-spirited. They had simply been betrayed before and feared outsiders. Instead of taking offense, he chose understanding. By reframing the situation, he transformed conflict into connection. I started practicing this in my own life. Every time something upset me, I asked, how can I reframe this into a lesson? Instead of seeing a rude person as an enemy, I saw them as someone who was struggling inside. Instead of seeing failure as a setback, I saw it as feedback. Instead of seeing delays as obstacles, I saw them as opportunities to slow down. Nothing changed, except the way I looked at life, and that changed everything. So, the next time life throws you something unexpected, ask yourself, what if this isn't happening to me, but for me? Because maybe, just maybe, it is. 10. Mastering emotions is a daily practice. For years, I thought emotional control meant suppression. That to be strong, I had to ignore my feelings. That to be unshakable, I had to bury my emotions deep and never let them surface. I was wrong. True emotional mastery isn't about shutting down your feelings. It's about understanding them and choosing how to respond. A Zen master once gave a young warrior a sword and told him, "Sharpen this blade every day, but never use it in battle." The warrior obeyed. For months, he honed the blade, making it sharper and sharper, but never once using it in a fight. One day, he found himself in a situation where he would have normally reacted with anger. But instead, he laughed. He finally understood. Mastery is not about never feeling anger. It's about knowing how to transform it. Think about that. How often do we let emotions control us? Someone makes a snide remark, and we snap back. We get bad news, and we spiral into self-pity. We let temporary emotions dictate our entire day. But what if, instead of reacting, we trained ourselves to observe first? For the next 7 days, try this. When something upsets you, don't react immediately. Just notice the feeling. Write it down. What triggered it? What thought pattern followed? Ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Choose awareness over impulse. First, it will be hard. Your mind will want to react out of habit. But over time, you will start to notice something incredible. Emotions that used to overwhelm you will lose their power. Situations that used to ruin your day will no longer shake you. Because when you master your emotions, you master your life. So, I'll leave you with this. What would happen if, just for a week, you observed your emotions without letting them control you? Try it, and watch what shifts. Take a deep breath. Now, think of the last time you were angry. Was it someone's words? An unfair situation? A past wound that still lingers? Now, ask yourself, did my anger change the situation? Or did it just drain my energy? Anger feels powerful in the moment, but in reality, it makes us weaker, clouding our thoughts, stealing our joy, and keeping us trapped in negativity. But here's the truth. You are not your anger. You are the stillness beneath the storm. You are the mountain in the hurricane. You are the vast sky, unshaken by passing clouds. And the moment you realize this, nothing can control you. So, as we wrap up, let me leave you with one question. What is one situation in your life that you can let go of today? Drop that stone from your backpack. Choose peace over resentment. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, comment, and share this video so that more people can find the strength to let go of anger and reclaim their peace. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Lotus Light Teachings for more insights on how to live with wisdom, clarity, and calm. Until next time, stay peaceful, stay mindful, and let go. Thank you for watching.